Right, well, hello, good afternoon, everyone that's joined us. Thank you to those that are here in the room with us. And I'm delighted to say that we have the lovely Danielle Ward with us this afternoon from Reward Events. Just before I introduce Danielle, she gets going with her presentation, just a couple of housekeeping bits and bobs, if you can just remain your mics on mute. And we've got the chat box to the right hand side. If you haven't used Remo before, there's a chat box, so if you've got any comments to make throughout the presentation, then please type in there. There's also, you can see the participants that are here this afternoon, and you can message them directly if you need to. And then we've also got the Q&A. So the Q&A is where if you've got any questions for Danielle, please type them in, and then we will go through them at the end of her presentation. But without further ado, Danielle, I'm going to just whiz on straight over to you. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Louise. And thank you to EventWell for inviting me to present today. So let me just share my screen and off. Okay. Right. Louise, can you just confirm you can see that? And that's all.
Yes, I can see that. Yep. Super. All good.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I'm here primarily to talk about obviously wellbeing, but specifically thinking about its role in driving a sustainable event industry. So just a little bit of background about who I am. So my name is Danielle Ward, and I am the director and the founder of Reward Events. So this is all new to me in terms of having my own business. I used to work, or I've worked in financial services mainly, have worked in corporate events for, well over 10 years now. And I was really struggling with, doing events for events' sake. I think, we go to thousands and thousands of events every year, but also the single use, all of the plastic and all of just the waste that went into the industry. It's notorious as an industry for its dark side, and it just really started to frustrate me. So I started sort of dabbling in sustainable initiatives, and it was something that really gave me purpose to what I was doing, and thought, I don't want this to be a nice to have. I really want it to be something that I can focus on and deliver for every event. So I left my role and I set up on my own, which I launched at the beginning of this year, which would have been fantastic until we hit, obviously, the pandemic and everything ground slowly to a halt. But Reward Events as a business, we are an end-to-end event management company, so delivering sustainable event experiences, but also can help with event consultancy. So, a lot of the people, I'm not sure exactly who's on the line today, but in terms of, you probably know how to do events. I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs, but in terms of if you wanted some support or some advice in terms of how to make those events more sustainable, that's something that we can help with. And also I like to work with sustainable suppliers, sustainable events, and often, connecting the dots, because there's a hell of a lot of people out there doing some amazing things. You just may not necessarily know about them. So helping with the sourcing of those suppliers is key as well. So I'm a member of a number of organisations, Sustainable Event Alliance and the Event Profs for Change, which you can see on the slide here. And really, these are sort of like global and local networks of event ambassadors, all, building a more sustainable event industry, or sort of working and sharing sustainable best practices, which is really helpful. But I design a lot of my events based on the Sustainable Development Goals, where I'm going to touch on that in a bit. But that's what is sort of underpins all of my events, and sort of can help you structure how you go about sustainability so it doesn't feel too overwhelming. But ultimately, the aim of Reward and the aim of what I'm doing is to show that you can still have, an incredible experience, and you're looking at, reducing the negative impacts that your events are having on the environment, but also looking at how you can be driving that positive social impact as well. And that's where the wellbeing piece comes in. So you can see here on the slide, when I first started thinking about setting up Reward, what's out there in terms of content and messaging, and it always came back to that reduce, reuse, recycle mantra, which, is still relevant, it's still very valid. But as you can see, and this is just a sample, there are a hell of a lot more than 3 R's. What can you repurpose? How can you be more responsible with your event planning? And really at Reward, it's about, rethinking your whole event process, really, and reimagining what your event could look like when you're reflecting on the impact that those events could be having on both a positive and a negative side. So, as I say, the whole premise behind Reward is to prove, you don't have to compromise. I think a lot of people think about sustainability and think, what am I not going to be able to have? I'm not going to be able to have that, amazing look and feel that I'm used to. Something's going to have to give and I'm going to have to compromise. And that's not the case at all. You can still have an amazing event just without the bad bits. We all love events. We're all desperately missing them and have done for the last 4 to 5 months. And we know, that essential human face-to-face contact is a necessity as human social beings that we are. But obviously it does have a dark side to it. There is, we contribute 5 billion tons of waste from the event industry globally every year, 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. And we know that just as an industry, it's very temporary. I don't know how you all feel, but, I feel as soon as I'm setting up an event, you're packing down and, on to the next one. So it's trying to rethink that whole process about how can we do things differently so that we're not, leaving that that detriment and that dark side behind us. So there is another way. And, what on earth am I talking about when I talk about sustainability? I think, the term is often thrown around. It can be very confusing and very complex and often puts a lot of people off because it's just so overwhelming in its nature. So before we sort of get into official definitions, I'd love to sort of throw this open. I've got a couple of polls today just to make it more interactive, but would love to know sort of what does sustainability mean to you? So if we go to, one second, here we go. If you go to, you can actually scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and input the code reward1 and the poll will load up. And I'm not sure how many people we've got on, but hopefully a couple of you can cast your vote in terms of what does sustainability mean to you. As I say, it's anonymous and there's no right or wrong answers, but it's really interesting to sort of see how people interpret the word and what it means. As I say, it is very wide ranging and can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Is everyone able to get on the poll? Reusing, yeah. I'll let that tick away and we can come back to it, because I think what we tend to find is we get a lot of words that are synonymous with the environment, with climate change, with the war on plastic. And, whilst that is a big part of it, it's only part of the story. And I think what's important is that we look at the whole picture. So in terms of an official definition, following the Brundtland report back in the 80s, sustainability was actually defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. And if you apply that specifically to an event management scenario, it's looking at the process of integrating the environmental and social responsibility issues into your event planning. So again, it's not just about, the war on plastic and climate change and environment. There is more to it than that. And that we term as the triple bottom line. And that's looking at, as you can see here, people, planet, and profit. So we need all three parts to work in conjunction with each other. You're aiming for that sustainability star in the middle. But as you can see, they're all equally as important as one another. So planet is, as I say, the one that you're probably most familiar with. And that's looking at, at clean energy, clean water and sanitation, people, and this is the piece that we're going to be focusing on in today's event around social progress, and that looks at well-being, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. It looks at education, it looks at diversity, gender equality, so all of the sort of the people and the social impacts. And then lastly, you've got the profit circle, which is the sort of the business side, the profit economic side. Has everybody got access to well-paid employment? How are we driving innovation throughout the industry? Those sort of things. But as I say, it's important that we're sort of ticking off all three elements to be able to say that we're truly sustainable. And I think what will be really interesting, especially in the current climate, obviously the government at the moment, people and the healthcare and getting everybody well again is a priority. But secondly, obviously, Boris is keen to get the economy up and running. The issue and the fear I have is that the planet and the environmental side is going to take a back seat. But as you can see, if we were truly driving for a sustainable, future-proof industry and society in general, we really need to make sure that the planet, the environmental section isn't left behind, and that all three are, we're striving for sustainability across all three. So it will be really interesting, in the same way, sustainability isn't just about protecting the environment. Our recovery after COVID-19 won't just be about getting the economy up and running again. It's going to take a bit more than that. And this was perfectly summed up by Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I mean, she's a total rock star, isn't she? And absolutely love her. But she summarised it amazingly and said, we need to address the societal well-being of our nation, not just the economic well-being, in terms of, getting that balance right. She also, I've just got another quote here, said the economic growth accompanied by worsening social outcomes is not success, it is failure. So again, really just proving that it's important to get that balance right. Okay, so sustainability in terms of, a framework. And as I said, I base my events on this framework that was announced by the UN back in 2016. And it looks really scary and looks like there's lots to it, and there is. But what's really good about this is it just gives you a framework to be able to base your plans and your strategy on. So there are 17 sustainable development goals. All various different parts of our life and our our ecosystem, and the key thing really when I think about sustainability, I know we've had official definitions, but thinking about what is it that we need to do to make the world work for everyone in terms of that balance and making sure that we've got equality for everyone. So what do we need to do to make the world work for everyone? And so it's been broken down into these 17 goals, and this is what I use when I'm thinking about my events. And by no means do I tick all of them off every time. That is too much, but it's a case of looking at the goals and understanding, okay, so with this event, where am I going to have the biggest impact, excuse me, and where can I drive the biggest change? And so it could be that you're focusing on working with local suppliers, responsible consumption and production, for example, that you're going to be working with a supplier that builds stands out of recycled plastic. It could be that you've got a panel for gender equality, that you've got a panel that's equally made up of men and women, and not just a male-based panel. There's lots of different ways that you can interpret these goals, but they're here as a framework for you to sort of take to your events and apply them in the best way that you can. So, we're here to talk about well-being. So what on earth has sustainability got to do with well-being? Well, quite a lot, actually. And you'll see that goal number 3, it has a whole dedicated goal just to good health and well-being, which is fantastic because, a lot of the others, they're all connected as well, just to add to the complexity. But it's great that we've got a dedicated goal just for well-being. So in a nutshell, what does that mean? And it refers to the need for ensuring healthy lives and good well-being for all people of all ages. So that's something that we're striving for across the globe, and something that we can obviously bring into our event strategy as well. So what can we do in the event industry to make sure that we're really striving to deliver sustainability via that well-being goal? So the role of well-being in events. I was going to do another poll. I don't know if we've had any more people join, but curious to get your thoughts again on this. So did you consider well-being at your events before COVID-19? Obviously, everything has become around healthcare and looking after yourself, friends and family, but was that there before? Were you thinking about building well-being strategies into your event design? How are you looking after your delegates? How are you looking after your crew? Was that something that you thought about before? Super. Okay, so try to, but not always. Absolutely. Just give it a second in case anyone else wants to vote. And obviously there's lots of things that we have to think about with our events, that it's not always front of mind well-being. Okay, let me just go back to the presentation. So what I'd like to do from a well-being perspective is just think about, what did we mean by well-being, and how could we, or were we, introducing and implementing well-being principles into our events before COVID? So if you can think back that far to when we were running events, what were the kind of things that we were doing or could be doing that would enable us to be driving that well-being throughout our event design? So as well as thinking about the content and the branding and the catering and the entertainment and everything else, how are we building well-being into our event experience? So the first one is to really embed well-being into the agenda from the beginning. So a little bit like sustainability, it's not something you can think about at the 11th hour and just think, oh, I really need to do a little bit of sustainability. It's not something that you can just shoehorn in at the end. So you really want to be considering and designing your event with a well-being agenda right from the outset. And that could be down to, what venue you're going to be using, how many sessions you're going to be running, what the format of those sessions are going to be. So really just making sure that well-being is front and center of your event design and planning from the beginning. And then when you're thinking about, what we don't want is to be sitting in an auditorium for hours on end, being spoken at, death by PowerPoint, lots of presentations, speaker after speaker after speaker, short, sharp sessions of sort of 30, maybe 40 minutes maximum, having lots of breaks, preferably outside, so that people can get outside, get some fresh air, feel energized, feel ready to go again. And really thinking about how you can build that in. Energizer sessions as well are really important, especially after break times. If you've had too much lunch or you've had too many cakes, thinking about how can you really get the energy going again when people come back into the room. So that really helps with keeping people going. And making it interactive, whether it's polls, whether it's making sessions more interesting in terms of their format. So you're not necessarily having everybody in theatre style, listening passively to a speaker, but mix up the format, mix up the layout of the room. You can even have active meetings where you're walking meetings, standing meetings, just making people rethink about how they feel and not sort of sitting slumped in a chair, probably looking on their phone at emails, but just trying to get the most out of your delegates and for the delegates to get most out of the event experience. Another thing as well, and similar to this image here, is you're seeing more and more people building in well-being zones, relaxation zones into their sort of networking spaces. So as a sort of escapism away from a busy exhibition hall or a plenary or meetings, it's nice to have some sort of quiet time away, and I think that's important as well to build in. We're also seeing yoga sessions in the morning, mindfulness sessions at lunchtime, so just sort of building that sort of well-being concept into everything about your event. So the second thing is, and we sort of touched on it before, is around sort of getting outside, or at the worst case, bringing the outside in. So there are a number of venues now that actually build in sort of activities, or have the option for you to add on outdoor activities to your event, your day delegate package. So that could be team building exercises outside, and the image that I've used here, there's an amazing venue down in Hampshire called Heckfield Place, and they actually run sort of foraging trips. So you can go out onto their grounds and forage for sort of ingredients, and then come back and use it for either cooking your meal in the evening or a cocktail masterclass, that sort of thing. So it's getting people outside, back to nature, and doing something, fun that they can actually, that's a unique experience that you're not going to get anywhere else. So thinking about how you can build those sort of activities into your agenda. They also have, boot rooms full of wellies and wax jackets, so that again, people can go outside, whatever the weather, and enjoy the grounds, walking tours, bike tours, all of those sort of things, so that it's not just about, you arrive at 9 o'clock, you leave at 5, and you haven't left the confines of the conference centre. We're really trying to build in elements of being outside into your event. And, we really think, from a wellbeing perspective, having that outside element, the last event I went to, the only people that were going outside were the smokers. So we need to sort of get away from that and, really promote, especially in this post-COVID-19 time that we're going to be going into, to really push that wellbeing agenda. And being, outside, fresh air, not only does it get you energized, you're more focused, you're more awake, it's better for anxiety, it reduces your stress levels. I think I read somewhere that actually half an hour every day outside has the same, medical benefits to actually taking, medication for depression and things like that. So actually being able to get outside and building that in as a key part of your event is essential. Cool. So that brings me on to, the environment again, to where you are going to be running your session inside. And a lot of this comes down to the venue that you're choosing. Make sure that you've got natural daylight and you've got natural ventilation. We've all been in those horrible conference rooms where you've got strip lighting and you're either being blasted with air conditioning or blasted with heating, neither of which are very conducive to, a good event experience for the delegates. So you want to be using venues that have got that natural daylight and natural ventilation, again, to be bringing that outside element in. Also think about, the different moods that you can create, with different colors, different smells. Creativity is associated with yellow, and orange is the sort of energy, but then in your relaxation zone, you may be thinking about, you want more blues and purples. So the use of color and the use of music and smells can all sort of help with, creating that experience that you want. And if you think about the 5 senses, so sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, using those different senses to create the environment that's optimum for the experience that you want to deliver is really important. So the next one is serving good brain food. So, we really, especially now, I think everyone is even more mindful of, eating healthily and, trying to be mindful, of what we're eating and what we're drinking. But it's important that at events, from a sustainability angle, we're definitely thinking about, using locally sourced and plant-based foods. But when we're thinking about catering, we want to be making sure that it's all fresh, that, you're not filling up on cakes and pastries and heavy carbs, which are going to end up, with energy slumps and people falling asleep in the auditorium. So sort of fresh, slow release carbohydrates. That's what you want to be thinking about to sort of keep the brain going and keeping everybody active. And there's inevitably going to be changes around how food is served following the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that we can't still be delivering, that optimum experience. So, we're probably going to be seeing almost the return of a lunchbox, kind of bento box kind of idea, where people will have individually portioned food. But again, you can still keep that quality and that freshness to keep, wellbeing again front and center of what you're doing. And then lastly, it's around increased accessibility. So in its basic form, we're talking about, where is your venue and how easily can people access it? So can you get to it by public transport? Can you walk? Can you cycle? Trying to obviously avoid car usage at all times. But also think about, the audience that you've got attending. We always ask about dietary requirements, but do we ever ask about accessibility requirements or, other needs that people may have? So thinking about, have you got wheelchair access? Have you got disabled toilets? Have you got hearing loops available for people that have got hearing aids? Also, the use of language that's on signage. We're going to need to have a lot more signage now around, to help with, social distancing, one-way systems, that sort of thing, but not to bombard people with anything too wordy. If you've got someone who's dyslexic, that's not going to be good for them. In the same way, as flashing lights, loud music, that really could impact people negatively. So it's thinking about the needs of your guests and the needs of your delegates and making sure that you've designed your event around those needs as well. So how is the role of wellbeing going to be changing post-COVID-19? So all of those things that we've just covered, those 5 areas, still very relevant, still absolutely stand. And if you haven't been doing them, now's the time to start. But it's going to be even more important now than ever that we're making sure that wellbeing is front and center of what we're doing in our events. So what will happen now, we want to look at, following the pandemic, how are things going to be changing, and how will well-being, or the role of well-being, change post COVID-19. So, let's get the first one out of the way in terms of sanitation and PPE. We all know we're going to be wearing masks. I mean, I already am, but wearing masks in shops is going to be mandatory. It already is on public transport. But, for events for the foreseeable future, we are going to need to be wearing masks. I think the jury's out on gloves, but definitely masks. We're going to need sanitizing stations. We're going to need temperature tracking. All of that, and all of our event spaces and surfaces are going to need to be cleaned before, during, and after the event. So, it's an intensive process. A hell of a lot's going to be, reliant on the venues, obviously, supporting this. With the provision of PPE, I guess the argument from a sustainability angle, and the fear that I have, is that we're going to be going back to that single-use plastic society, where you use it once and you're going to be throwing it away. WWF have already reported that if only 1% of masks and gloves were disposed of incorrectly, so only 1%, if they were disposed of incorrectly, that's going to result in 10 million masks ending up in or littering the environment every month, which is terrifying. We were making such huge progress in terms of clamping down on single-use plastic. People were using their, reusable bags, taking your coffee cup into Starbucks. But even now, the ban on plastic straws, plastic stirrers, and cotton buds that was due to come in at the end of this year has now been postponed by 6 months. So there is a real concern. Obviously, the plastic industry are pushing, plastic is safe, plastic is hygienic. When in actual fact, the virus survives a lot longer on a plastic surface than it would any other. So it is that sort of sustainability versus safety thing. Safety is always going to be absolutely paramount in our events that we're delivering, and we need to make sure we're communicating that to give our audience confidence. But it's not a case of either or. You can have a safe event which is also sustainable. So you can be looking at the reusable masks, whether you're asking people to bring their own or whether you supply them, but then just have a bin as people are leaving that they can drop them into. You can sanitize them, deep clean them, and then reuse them for your next event. So there are ways around it that don't involve single-use items that ends up everybody throwing things away. Similarly with the sanitizer bottles, lots of people will probably be thinking about, we can give everybody, a little mini bottle of sanitizer in like a giveaway bag. Nobody needs, again, more single-use plastic. You have the reusable pumps, preferably contactless ones, so that you're not having to touch anything, the ones that are operated by your foot or are automatic. So there's lots of ways around it. But again, I think the message is clear that you can be sustainable and you can be safe at the same time. It's not about compromise. Okay, so the second one is obviously the revised delegate journey. In terms of social distancing, whether that's going to be 2 meters, 1 meter, 1 meter plus, whatever that means. But, there is going to be, that whole redesign on how we operate our events. Journey around an event space, you will have the signage to make sure that, it's one way in, one way out. Social distancing, as I said, but also the track and trace systems. We're going to need to be able to measure who's in the room, where have they come from, have they, been in contact with anybody that's been poorly, so that, should anything happen, that we've got that all that information on the system. So from a sustainability perspective, this is fantastic because, we can start using contactless registration. So, the use of QR codes, and making it as efficient as possible, rather than, having lengthy, paper trails. Everything can be digitally managed, and exactly where people are, and who they are, and who they've been in contact with, which is really important. But yeah, we need to make the events as contactless as possible. The less services that people are touching, the better. Okay, so social distancing will inevitably impact on our capacity. I think some venues are reporting, even up to 50% of people of capacity is going to be lost, and this will undoubtedly have an impact on obviously costs from a venue perspective, but also the amount of people that we can deliver our events to, and that's where this hybrid event model comes in. So the future absolutely is hybrid. we saw very quickly, almost overnight, people switching their event formats to being an online version. And, I don't see this going anywhere anytime soon. What we will see is that people are starting to complement these digital experiences with physical in-person events. And if you think about, the situation with travel at the moment, there's still certain countries that have travel bans. Again, there's confusion over air bridges and where it's safe to go and not go, and quarantining measures as well. But whilst that's still sort of up in the air, people are understandably going to be, I think, a bit nervous about traveling for events, whether that's domestically or internationally. And so this hybrid model enables you to sort of have the best of both worlds. You can have your regional hub events and connect everybody digitally online, but also it enables people to get involved and interact with your event at a level that they feel comfortable with. So from a wellbeing perspective, it's perfect, because you're not having, it's not a case of, well, if you're not here, you're missing out. You can still be part of the event, which is really important. So the issue for me with hybrid events is, what we don't want to do is, literally just stick a webcam up at the back of the auditorium and live stream the event, and that's it. From a wellbeing perspective, you need to be thinking about your delegate journey, in the same way as you would for your physical event. How are you designing your online digital event, and how are those two experiences connecting? That's going to be absolutely essential. So in the same way you have a physical, an AV production company for your physical event, you'll have an AV production company for your digital event, and really work and design that experience so that if you're online, you're not missing out. It's still immersive, it's still engaging, it's still interactive, and that's going to be really, really important. So having this hybrid event model really opens up, your event to such a much wider audience. And that brings me on to the next point about championing global diversity and inclusivity, which is a massive part of sustainability. But having that hybrid model, I know personally how many more people I've spoken to on an international level, just because I can. There aren't any barriers, there aren't any boundaries. You're not limited to how many people you can fit into a conference room. And that will be the case, with these hybrid models moving forward. So enabling, your event now to reach so many more people than it would have done before, which is fantastic. And, we really want to be driving that diversity and driving that inclusivity with the events that we're delivering. Only 30% of speakers are female, for example. So we need to be getting that up to 50%. We want all of our panels to be diverse, races, cultures. We want those different perspectives and those different, debates and opinions. That's what's going to make an interesting event. And so I think it's really important that hybrid model allows that. And something that's really interesting as well when we're thinking about wellbeing is the use of language and the biodiversity of language. Events tend to be delivered in English, fortunately for me, that's the only language I can speak, sadly. But, when you think about non-native English speakers or non-native English delegates, they're having to, work and operate in a language that's not their native tongue. So you're often limited in what you can say as a speaker or what you're understanding as a delegate, rather than saying what you want to say. You're limited to the language that you have. So I think a huge part of driving the diversity and the well-being for the audience and the speakers is being able to present, listen, ask questions, interact in your native language. And I don't know whether any of you joined the EventWell Summit over the last couple of days, but Raffaella Marchesi from AIC, which is the International Association of Interpreters, she ran a session actually on language diversity and the isolation of language that can happen, obviously, when you're limited to the language that you're presenting in. And I did an event with them recently about that, and they're super keen to work with the MICE industry and all of us event professionals, because what they can offer in terms of a skill will be fantastic for us, enabled to be able to drive that well-being message and for people to be able to understand and join an event in their local language rather than having to it always be in English. So I can share her details, but that I think will be really, really interesting moving forward, and a massive win for sustainability from a diversity perspective, but also a win for well-being as well. Okay, so lastly, I just wanted to sort of come back to this, and I guess this is a sort of an obvious as event professionals, that, you know, whatever we're trying to do from an event perspective is always to empathise with our delegates, and always be thinking, you know, if I was a delegate and I was attending this event, you know, what do I want to see, hear, experience, do? And I think, you know, that's more important now than ever. As I say, there's going to still be, despite all of these health and safety measures being put in, you know, with us trying to incorporate outside activities, you know, all of these different things that we're doing, I think there's still going to be a hell of a lot of nervousness and fear in the industry around COVID-19, understandably. And I think, you know, as I say, the hybrid piece enables people to attend and engage at a level they feel comfortable with. But it's also important that, you know, I think we are aware of that, and, you know, communicate accordingly with our delegates. You know, it's really important that we're setting those expectations, that, you know, we have got these measures in place. If anything, we're doing more than the government are asking us to, because obviously guidelines there have been a little lax. So it's a case of, you know, making sure you're communicating, you're reassuring your delegates of what you've got in place, and that they can have some confidence and some real trust in you as an event manager and your event, that everything's being handled and that it will still be an amazing experience, but safe as well. And if we can also be sustainable, then that's even better. Okay, so just to wrap up, or before we wrap up, I wanted to just do a last little poll, just to sort of see how important wellbeing is going to be at your events post-COVID. So we know before, we know before that, oh, hold on, sorry, 1 second, the poll has just gone to sleep. Let me just try that again. Sorry, everyone. Let's just start that again. So the poll here, how important is wellbeing going to be at your events post-COVID? So we tried before, and we were saying, you know, we try and build in wellbeing, but we don't manage it all the time. So post-COVID, you know, with health and safety being absolutely paramount, how important do we think wellbeing is going to be at our events post-COVID? More important than ever, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely how I'm feeling. I'm conscious that, you know, people have been without events for, you know, a long time, and we are all desperate to get going. But I think in order to sort of rebuild that trust that people have, and, you know, getting that confidence back in terms of socializing and attending events, I think, yeah, it's going to be more important than ever to make sure we're building in those wellbeing principles and really communicating what we're doing to our audiences. And that empathy, I think, is going to be really, really key in getting people back to our events as well. Great. Okay, so just to wrap up then, and, you know, I love this quote, and I think it sort of sums everything up really nicely, that nothing should go back to normal. Normal wasn't working. And this, you know, specifically is, for me, from a sustainability perspective, you know, if anything, the pandemic has sort of shone a much needed light on the issues that we had before. You know, climate change hasn't gone anywhere. You know, the issues that we had and the requirement for sustainability is still very much there. So it's just making sure that, you know, we are using this time to sort of reset and rethink, okay, this is our opportunity to sort of take a step back and think about how we can redesign things. And I've just got a couple of stats here, actually, that, you know, in recent surveys, you know, it's all been really positive in terms of people's feelings and thoughts around sustainability, and particularly, you know, about what is normal and what will normal look like. So only 9% of Britons want to go back to normal. 56% of event professionals reported sustainability being an important part of their event planning in the future. 90%, there's been a 90% increase in Google searches around sustainable living, and 70% agree or strongly agree that sustainability should be a priority for the event industry post-COVID-19. So I think, you know, making sure that we're harnessing this enthusiasm, this momentum, you know, hopefully it will be a real springboard for us to transform the industry. And I think, you know, it's more important than ever that our economy is being built on these principles of both environmental but also social well-being. As we've seen, you know, that's sort of the heart and soul really of I think getting things back to normal, and making people feel comfortable, feeling happy and feeling safe. And I think, as event professionals, we have a real duty of care in order to be delivering that, and building those sustainability values into our planning. And, wellbeing is a significant part of sustainability. I think has a real role in sort of driving that and driving the industry and getting us back in business. So there are my details. Feel free to drop me an email or visit the website, or that's my Instagram handle as well. And I can then open or go back to Louise for any questions that people have.
Yes. Hello. That was great, Danielle. That was really, really informative. I really enjoyed that. And just such an important topic, especially at, in this time, for sure. And it's interesting you end on the, about going back to normal. And I keep using the terminology, I just want to go back to normal. But actually, what is normal now?
Yeah.
Because normal has completely changed. I don't think there is such thing as normal anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting. But
yeah.
I think as an industry, and event professionals, we're all really keen to get going and really keen to make the most of it. And it's been great to sort of have this time to, as I say, to reset, think about what's important, and really sort of take the opportunity to make a difference, really.
Yeah.
And I definitely think wellbeing is a real key part of that, because I think, as I say, there's going to be a lot of nervousness around coming back, seeing people joining events, and so there's a lot of things that we have to sort of manage, and expectations I think we have to set.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And it was, astonishing some of the stats that you kind of used there, and especially about the, I think it was WWF, you said about the plastic, and and it is scary. Obviously, it is scary because obviously, if events need to be more mindful of obviously COVID and everything else, but then, as you say, it's all plastic bottles of sanitation and PPE equipment. It's all plastic, so it's really difficult.
That is the fear, and I think the frustration that I've had is that there's been a lot of push for, but plastic is safe. Even when you go to the supermarket, people are feeling that something wrapped in plastic is safer, and you think, well, actually, you're better off just buying something not wrapped in plastic and washing it. Exactly then where it's been and who's touched it.
Absolutely.
All these supply chains from all over the world, you don't know what's been in contact with it. And as I say, the virus lasts a lot longer on plastic than it does on cardboard or other materials. So I think, like with anything, and sustainability, often gets sort of, but I wouldn't know where to start, and I don't know about these suppliers, and there is always a challenge. And with any sort of change, there's always going to be a challenge. And I think that's why people like me and other sustainable event companies that are out there, we're here to help and to put you in contact with PPE, like reusable PPE companies that can supply materials that you need. You don't need to have all of this single use material. I think everybody defaulted to that in the panic. And even places like Starbucks and Costa, were refusing people to use their reusable coffee cups because it was the fear that they were spreading the infection. That's now been signed off, and it's very clear that that's not the case. Again, some supermarkets weren't letting you use reusable shopping bags that everyone had sort of had.
See, that was weird. I found that weird in the beginning when I first went to the supermarket, and you couldn't take your own bags in, and I was like, but it's come from my house, I know. I'm fine, I'm the only one that's touched it. It's actually safer than getting a new plastic bag in the supermarket.
And that's the thing. And I think there was especially in the beginning, there was a hell of a lot of scaremongering around but we have to be safe, and the only way to be safe is to have single use. So it's definitely, I'm on a mission to show that it can be sustainable and safe. You can be sensible. You haven't got to all the hard work and all of the we've come so far in terms of checking people's mentality and their behavior around it. What we don't want to do is go backwards, and we don't want that to be wasted. So
absolutely. It was interesting. I enjoyed your polls, actually. That's really cool. Claire did put in the chat the poll. I think when we were talking about clients, about when we were putting on events, did we think about sustainability? And she was on the yes, but it wasn't always taken on board by the client. And that's exactly right. And I found that in my experience is that we need to be the ones as event planners to educate our clients, because they don't really think about that. They kind of just thinking about their strategy and what their event is supposed to get and what their delegates are supposed to get out of, but they're not thinking about the bigger picture. And so, Claire quite rightly says, we've thought about it, but it's never taken on board by the client. So
and I think, and a lot of the time people often think, oh, it's going to cost me too much money, or I'm going to have to compromise. I'm not going to be able to get the look and feel that I want. They're the biggest challenges. And the cost argument, we do always come back to that. And understandably, there are going to be some things that are going to initially cost more, but the more that we are demanding it and we're asking suppliers to supply it, I think a lot of the time suppliers, it's a race to the bottom, really. Everyone's trying to undercut each other. And I think it comes down to who do you want to be as a business? We're talking about responsible decision making. Again, you haven't got to totally reinvent who you are and what you're doing as a company and everything. It's just a case of looking at, okay, well, who are we working with, and do they share our vision for the values that we uphold as a business? Sustainability being one of them. Working with the right venues, working with the right suppliers, a lot of that the hard work piece can be taken by them. So again, when we're building in wellbeing, working with a venue that has got an amazing when looking at the food that they're supplying, or they've got outside space, they've got well lit spaces, they've got good ventilation, it's embedded in sort of their delivery anyway. You're not asking them to go above and beyond, and there's a hell of a lot of venues out there that are doing some amazing stuff. So I think it's a case of and now we've got the time having a look at that and understanding, okay, well, who do we want to work with? And if they're not sharing your vision for your business, which hopefully is a sustainable one, now's the time to sort of mix that up and find who you are, because there are a hell of a lot of people out there, and again, that will take a lot of that pressure off you. As an event professional, you haven't got to do it all. And I think that's a key thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, going back to sort of educating businesses and certainly vendors that, that we turn to for help in putting on events, but it only really takes one business to make one change. Even if they just make one change, it's something. We don't expect people to kind of change everything, as you say, reinvent the wheel overnight. It's just about making that one change, that one pledge.
And I think implement. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are so important, and I find it so useful because I'll look at an event and I'll go through each of them and sort of think, okay, well, that's not as relevant, or I can't necessarily control that the venue's going to have solar panels on the roof, for example. That there are some things that are out of our remit, and that's fine, but because there are a hell of a lot of things that we can control, and whether it's just choosing a different supplier, or just thinking about, okay, well, giveaways, which they're my absolute bugbear.
I agree.
Do we need them? I can see everyone's going to be doing little mini bottles of sanitizer, or
it's not needed. It's not needed at all. Not at all. No.
And often I find it, can become, it almost looks a bit desperate. I think there's ways of investing in your delegates and making them feel special and, having an amazing experience without sort of giving them loads of plastic tat. When I first started experimenting with sustainability, we scrapped giveaways and we started doing charitable donations instead. And so people had 3 charities that they could choose from, and they pledged which charity they wanted to go to, and £5 went to that charity on their behalf. So things like that, because nobody needs another pen or another stress ball. It just I just think it just cheapens the whole experience and just makes you look a bit desperate. There's other ways that you can invest in your delegates without going down that road.
And ultimately becoming recognizing sustainability and the importance is actually, in the long run, is actually going to cut costs, I think, for a lot of businesses. It's kind of a win-win situation if people look at it in the right way. It's so important. Guys that are still here in the room, I can see we've got a couple of people still here. If you've got any questions, don't forget to pop them in the box, the Q&A box, if you've got any questions, if anything cropped up through Danielle's presentation. I enjoyed the quote, Jacinda Ahern.
I love her. I absolutely love.
Yeah, it's not about economic. What was it? Economic sustainability. It's about sociable or sociable sustainability. I can't remember what the quote was now, but yeah, it was.
Yes. Let me just get it. I don't want to misquote her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to address the societal well-being of our nation, not just the economic well-being. Yeah, and I mean that is so vital for me, and especially, you know, coming out of the pandemic, because that is the thing. The focus is going to be on, you know, getting everybody, you know, from a healthcare perspective, out of hospital, and, you know, and getting a vaccine and getting rid of this horrendous virus. Absolutely, that is paramount, and safety is paramount. And then the next thing, you know, is getting the economy back up on track. The issue is, and, you know, normally when I'm running events, I do ask the question of, you know, do you think sustainability is going to be prioritized, or is it going to be sidelined post-COVID? You know, and I have had quite varying responses to that. And, you know, the last one was a 50-50 split. People couldn't quite decide. But otherwise, it's been sort of about a 60% thinking it's going to be prioritized, which was really encouraging. And I think, you know, similar to those other stats that I sort of shared, in terms of, you know, I think people want to do the right thing. And I think, you know, lockdown and, you know, this whole 4 or 5 month period that we've been through has made you sort of recognize, you know, what's important. Even, you know, you're whether it's, you know, your local community and sort of helping people, you know, getting shopping for people or medication, you know, people have been volunteering, people, you know, that sort of that community spirit, which is a massive part of sustainability, and building sustainable communities. I just hope that, you know, people, you know, inherently have a very short-term memory, so we just hope that isn't forgotten, and people do, you know, strive to continue and uphold those principles. I mean, I remember at the beginning, you know, you never knew when you could get back out to the supermarket again, or whether, you know, when the delivery slots were going to open up. So when you think about food wastage, which again is a big part of sustainability, you know, if something was a bit okay, well, normally I'd probably throw that away, but actually I better eat it because I don't know when I'm next going to get to the shops. You know, that sort of mentality. I think we have become very expectant. You know, you are, if Amazon don't deliver the next day, you think, oh, hold on, what's wrong? And suddenly in the pandemic, you know, you were very understanding if something took 2 weeks to be delivered. And, you know, it's just, I think it's just, it has reset all of our expectations. And I'm just hoping that, you know, we take, what do they say, you know, don't waste a good crisis or something. You know, there's always opportunity, and there's always an opportunity to transform. And I really hope that certainly the event industry, that this is something that, you know, is going to happen as a result.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. There was a quote that came up in one of our sessions at the Digital Summit yesterday, was about the word emerge is in emergency. So it's about what emerges out of that emergency, like making positive changes. And I thought that was quite key, actually, and certainly in this crisis. Claire's just put in the chat, well-being and sustainability will be my core focus moving forward. And absolutely right. Yeah, that's great, Claire. And I think, you know, definitely that's what we need. And again, coming back to well-being, you know, making sure that well-being is at the forefront of people's minds in organizations as well. And that is part of sustainability, is maintaining, you know, people's well-being, and making, especially after, you know, what everyone's been through at this moment, is making sure that people are okay, and that managers are asking,
our biggest asset in the event industry is our people. And I think, you know, and obviously all of the principles I've spoken about apply to delegates, apply to your crew, apply to you know, yourself. You know, and something I ran an interview actually at the beginning of lockdown. I sort of reached out to a lot of sustainable businesses just to sort of keep in check and sort of see, you know, what they were doing over the time and how they got into sustainability. And I spoke to Bernadette from the Event Professionals Journal, you know, around sort of, and she said, oh, you know, well, what about, I'm not really sure about sustainability. And I said, but well-being is what you're all about. It's a huge part of sustainability. So that was really exciting. And she was saying that, you know, a company she used to work for, at the very beginning of every event, you would have like an event check-in, you know, with your crew, and just sort of, you know, how are you feeling today? Like, are you worried about anything? Something in your mind? And just really sort of gets everybody thinking, actually, how am I feeling? Well, I'm not really fit. I haven't really slept that well, or I didn't have breakfast, you know, whatever it is. And I think it makes you recognize, you know, rather than just sort of going on the treadmill, which, you know, notoriously we do in the event industry, because it is, you know, one after the other, sort of that taking that opportunity to sort of pause and think, okay, well, I'm not feeling that great today. Or, you know, asking for help. I think just recognizing that and acknowledging that is a massive thing. So yeah, I think well-being and looking after our people is going to be absolutely essential to this. And essential to driving a sustainable event industry moving forward. And when I think about sustainability for me in terms of what that means, it is like future-proofing and resilience. And if you haven't got, you know, if you haven't looked after your people, you know, that's not going to last very long.
So absolutely. And again, it's the one small thing, isn't it? It's one small question: are you okay? Or asking yourself, am I okay? You know, it's
and being honest. I think being honesty is a massive part of this. And you know, when I think about you know, building in those well-being elements, you know, what did we used to do before, and obviously what's going to be changing off the back of COVID, and a lot of them, you know, it's not rocket science, and it's probably a lot of stuff that people are already doing, but they may not necessarily associate it with well-being or associate it with sustainability. You know, serving the right food, making sure that you're not sitting in a dark, damp, you know, air-conditioned room, all these sort of things that we just think, well, as a delegate, what do I want? You know, I want to be outside, or I want to be, you know, eating nice food, or I want to be going to an event that, you know, has got energizers and it's got different formats and it's going to mix it up and it's going to keep me engaged, you know, all those sort of things. I think often, notoriously, we do tend to go, oh, well, we've done this before and that worked before, so let's do that
again.
But you know, this is the time to sort of just really reinvent and think, okay, well, what could we do differently and what could we do better? So it'll be really, really interesting, I think, to see. And I think that this is a great opportunity to be creative as well. When we were talking about, you know, how food's going to be served, you know, I love the idea of having your own individual little bento box with your lunch. You know, I think that's
absolutely
really cool.
Non-plastic.
And you know, you brand it up and you can be really creative. So I think, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. I think as soon as we get the green light and we can start, you know, getting back to what we love doing, there's going to be huge potential for being creative and sort of totally reinventing what events look like. I think if we go to an event and it looks like it did pre-pandemic, you're in the wrong place. I think
we're in trouble. Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Danielle. That's been such an amazing EventWell chat. We're just coming to the end of the session now. I could talk all day about this subject, but, but it's been great. I don't think we've got any other questions. Just checking. No. Cool. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. But obviously you gave out your details, so I'm sure those will be in touch, and obviously people will catch up with this session if they missed it today. But I'm sure people will get in touch with you after this. And
any questions or any advice, then absolutely, please reach out. I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Great, lovely. Thanks again, Danielle, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.